This is a really special episode for me. I have my husband on to share his story of our daughter's births. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a practicing board-certified OBGYN who's had the privilege of helping hundreds of moms bring their babies into this world. I'm here to help you be knowledgeable, prepared, confident, and empowered to have a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at ncrcoaching.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 81. Thank you for being here with me today. So on this episode of the podcast, I have my husband, Falcon. Yes, Falcon, like the bird. And he is on to share his experience of our daughter's births. A while back, I had someone reach out and say, it would be great to hear a dad's perspective of a birth story. And I decided that I really wanted the first dad on my podcast to be my husband. So I kind of harassed him until he agreed to come on. And I wanted him to come on because he is such a great dad, as you will hear me say in the episode. But honestly, I was also really just kind of curious about what he would say. This isn't something that I ever feel like we've talked about in great detail, even though our girls are now 10 and 12. And I actually learned some things that I did not know after we had this conversation. So we had a great talk about what prenatal care was like from his perspective, how he felt about the transition to parenthood and preparing for it, what my labor was like for him, and why he didn't want to talk about how my C-section experience was for him. For anybody who's listened to the podcast before or followed me, you know that my first C-section was done with inadequate anesthesia. It was a bit of a traumatic experience for me, and he shares why he actually didn't want to talk about that in detail on the podcast today. Now, y'all, he was a little bit nervous to come on, but he did a great job, and I know that you are going to enjoy this episode. Now, real quick, before we get into the episode, let's do a listener shout out. The title of the review, and this was from Apple Podcast, says A Boost of Confidence. And it says, Dr. Rankins, thank you. As a male listener and first-time father-to-be, this podcast has provided me a great, and that's all caps, great boost of confidence for being a supportive and knowledgeable partner for my wife as she carries our baby. Your podcast is very insightful, unbiased, informative, and a great resource on questions that we had and questions we didn't know we had. We've learned so much and feel very empowered as we matriculate through this pregnancy. We've utilized the free course on creating the birth plan and successfully found an OB based on using the interview questions provided in the course. We look forward to learning more and will continue to support you in your work. God bless you, the Baxters. Thank you for that really lovely review. I so appreciate it. And I love how you are so involved in getting educated and empowered as an expectant dad. I 100% encourage all partners to do exactly what he did in that regard. So you should definitely encourage your partner to listen to the podcast or go through my materials with you, whether it's my free class on how to make a birth plan that works or my signature online childbirth education class, the birth preparation course. Partners should definitely take part so that they too can be empowered to really advocate for you as the birthing person. All right, so let's get into the episode with my husband, Falcon. So we have tried to do this many times and we keep laughing because it's just weird because we're in different rooms, but and in the same house, and we've never done this before. So this feels like a little bit awkward, but at any rate, I am really excited that you agreed to do this after I kind of slightly harassed you a little bit to death.
Slightly?
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. But I really wanted to have the perspective of a dad on the podcast. And of course, I wanted the first dad on the podcast to be my dear, sweet, loving, wonderful husband of almost 15 years.
Well, hopefully that doesn't end up being a mistake on your part, but cool, let's do this.
It will not be. It will not be. All right. So I thought we would focus on our first daughter's birth because I feel like that was the one that was a lot of things for us and a little bit of trial by fire.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we start off by having you talk about what was the experience of prenatal care like for you?
I mean, which aspect specifically? Because it was really just sort of me showing up for appointments with you and paying attention and
Yeah, so I guess I wonder, like, how do you feel like you as a dad were treated during visits? Do you feel like you were ignored? Do you feel like you were invisible? Like, what did it feel like for you?
I wouldn't say ignored, or invisible at least. Yeah, sometimes it really came down to who the provider was, who the nurse that we were seeing, and their particular temperament, I guess. So yeah, there were certainly times where I felt sort of like secondary in the whole part. But I think that's kind of understandable. I guess we reflect a lot on like how society builds these roles for us as men and women, and yeah, like most people are probably generally less concerned about the father or the male in the room at the time. So I guess it wasn't surprising maybe to feel secondary in these visits.
So kind of like accepted as sort of how you would expect, but I mean, I imagine, I wonder, do dads feel like ignored? Like, is there something that you would have wanted differently, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it'd be a nicer experience if I had felt, more engaged in it, engaged by the provider. But and the other thing too is, this was what 10, 12 years ago, or however
Yeah.
old our children are,
Yeah.
and I think
10 and 12.
yeah, I'm sure, I'm hopeful that attitudes have changed a lot in the past 10 years, but
Yeah, we'll have to ask people after the episode what their thoughts are on how
yeah,
things have changed for sure. But yeah, it has been a while, in fairness. Also, in fairness, I delivered and I got prenatal care at the place where I worked, where I
yeah,
used to work. So people knew me.
yes, that probably did not help.
So it was natural for them to kind of talk to me more than
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about something most pregnant women aren't getting enough of: omega-3 DHA. The recommendation is over 200 milligrams a day, but less than 5% of pregnant women in the US meet that. That's one of the reasons I love Ritual's Essential Prenatal. It has 350 milligrams of vegan DHA plus other key nutrients like methylated folate and choline to support baby's neural tube development. As an OBGYN, I appreciate that Ritual goes beyond the basics. The formula is science-backed, third-party tested for heavy metals and microbes, and every ingredient is traceable. And the delayed release design, it's gentle on the stomach, something that really matters, especially if there's trouble with nausea during pregnancy. You deserve to know exactly what you're putting into your body, especially when it comes to prenatal multivitamins. And with Ritual's dedication to traceable science and sourcing, you always will. See for yourself with 25% off your first month at ritual.com/Dr. Nicole. Start Ritual or add Essential Prenatal to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/Dr. Nicole for 25% off your first month. So what was the experience of me being pregnant, us being pregnant, however you want to say it, like for you? Because I know that I was pretty anxious. And you can be honest.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was just no more anxious than usual. Yeah. What was the experience like for me for you being pregnant? I remember feeding you a lot, trying to make sure that you had, a well balanced diet and we're getting plenty of fruits and vegetables, things like that. Beyond that, I don't know. Like, I mean, it's kind of weird. This doesn't answer the question, but like, I guess in thinking about things for this, this podcast interview, just sort of reflecting on how much like you kind of expect having children to be this life altering thing, and it hasn't really been that way for me. Like it just kind of feels normal,
Oh,
So it's just kind of like this weird question of like, well, what was it like? What was this particular period like? I don't know. It's just kind of part of. It's just another part of the 15 years that we had together. Like it's not. I guess I understand why it should stick out, because we were bringing new lives into this world. But, it just, thinking back on it, it just still feels very normal and just like almost like a typical day in a sense. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
it does. And I think it speaks to like your general kind of personality, but also it makes me feel like one, did you just marry a crazy anxious person and you're just used to it? Or like, because for me it felt like, especially in the beginning, I felt, looking back, I just felt really like really anxious. I was anxious about getting pregnant. I was, like trying to get pregnant. And then when I had that bleeding episode in the very beginning,
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then once like we found out that she was going to have, a problem, quote unquote, at birth, it was just so much for me. But it's interesting to me how you seem to have processed it either, later or in the moment. It just felt like something that was part and parcel for what you signed up for, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is. Like, we were going to love our child regardless of what the outcome was, right? So, yeah, obviously, like the drama was not fun. The multiple dramas throughout that pregnancy and delivery, but I guess like looking back on it, like it all worked out. So it's kind of hard to like, not hard, but I don't really look back and have those same sorts of feelings of anxiety. Those aren't the parts that I hang on to, I guess. But certainly, yeah, like, yeah, it was scary at moments. But it's that kind of fear where like you don't really have an option. Like you have to keep going. You have to figure something out. You have to face what's going on. So what's the point in? I don't know.
No, I mean, I get what you're totally saying, and it totally speaks to how, like I said, how you are as a person, and in general, I think how you help balance me out and keep my my anxiousness at bay and keep it from getting like overwhelming. That's how you as a support person. That's why I lean on you. I'm getting a little sappy here, I guess, as my partner for sure and best friend for sure.
But also, I mean, I guess I should clarify that, like, just because I'm sitting here and sort of, I don't want to be dismissive of this, like, for other people that are going through this, or even like, of ourselves at the time. Like, yeah, this is like scary stuff when you're in the middle of it, obviously. But yeah, this just, like I said, looking back on it, like those aren't the sorts of things that I hang on to, I
Right,
guess.
right. So let's look back a little bit on some of the more drama moments, like you said. What were your thoughts when we first found out? And I remember very clearly, we were at an ultrasound and they realized that there was a potential or that something was wrong that they could see on the ultrasound. What were your thoughts about when we found out that she had this issue? And I should say the issue, guys, is duodenal atresia. Our first daughter was born with an intestinal malformation where the first part of her intestines weren't connected. She had to have surgery 3 days after she was born, and we'll talk about what that was like. But we found out during the pregnancy that there was some issue. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, same sort of thing. Like, of course, it's a shock and it's scary because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. But I remember talking to a friend and like, just sort of confessing like, like I'm supposed to be this child's father. Like I can't even protect her from this. And he's just like, you're being stupid. Like, of course you can't protect her from this. Like this is just what's happening. Um, so I guess like, talking to that friend, sort of almost having this moment of feeling like I've already failed in my duty as a father, which, to stop something that was like clearly out of my control, and so like, yeah, so I guess maybe once I kind of got that foolish thought out of my head,
Which I didn't know that you thought, by the way. I'm guessing you didn't tell me that at the time. Today, I didn't know that you felt that way.
yeah, well, you learn something new every day. And it was, I think maybe I probably didn't even confess it because I think even at the time, like, I realized how ridiculous that was, but again, it speaks to like in the moment you have these thoughts and like how do you deal with them, and yeah, I think my way of finding peace of it is just like, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen, and if this child comes out this way or that, we're still gonna love her, we're still gonna take care of her, we're still gonna do everything we need, to the best of our ability. So, you just have to keep moving forward, I guess.
Yeah, I know. I felt definitely very stressful because we had to make that decision about because this particular malformation can be associated with chromosome issues, and we like particularly trisomy 21 or Down syndrome most often. And we had, we decided to do the amniocentesis to look at the chromosomes. I felt like that was stressful and how we would have handled that.
Yeah, and by the time we had gotten to that point, like I really, like I had found peace with that, So whatever the test results were going to say, like that was going to be okay.
Okay. So we got the diagnosis. We, did the amniocentesis. Everything was good. Then I remember us meeting with the pediatric surgeon, and after that, I kind of felt more calm about things because I felt like he was just kind of like, oh, most of these babies are born full term. They they stay in the hospital for a couple days and we fix it and then they go home. Do you recall that at all?
I don't even remember that. Like I vaguely remember going to his office. Yeah, but I don't remember the discussion. I don't, that doesn't stick with me.
Okay, yeah, because that's so different than what we actually experience. So before we talk about like me going into labor and her being born 8 weeks early, did you feel like during the pregnancy, like you felt like you needed to do anything to prepare for your role as like being my support person or being a dad?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always kind of like about the preparation and the stockpiling, and because of us, we didn't have to buy toilet paper, through the first 3 months of quarantine.
Correct. We didn't have to buy toilet paper or paper towels or
Right,
and
because we already had it.
I haven't been in a grocery store in I don't know how long because of you. So
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but I'm sure that like I was hard at work, kind of setting things up and making sure that we had what we needed. And I do remember like after she was born, and my fully stocked diaper bag,
you have always been so much better at those things than me, for sure.
But yeah, it wasn't that I was. I don't know how to say it. Like it wasn't that I had this sort of like you're going to be a dad now, so you have to go do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It's just this is happening. Like we have to make sure that we're all ready for this. So what do we
Gotcha.
need?
Yeah. And then was there anything that you thought about like in terms of the actual experience of her birth that you felt like you wanted or needed or anything? Or was it just kind of like, I'm going to show up and we're going to have a baby?
Like no, this part I think is harder for me because I think really, again, it's sort of like thinking about, thinking back to some of the stuff that happened, as we were, going back and forth, and you were really twisting my arm to do this interview. um, but just like I don't have, I think, a healthy relationship with hospitals in general, and just hospitals are not associated with positive outcomes for me, and I think again, sort of reflecting on this and looking back on that, like that whole lead up for the hospital, I probably didn't even want to think about. So it wasn't, I would never like try to imagine what the perfect ideal setup for this was. Like in hindsight, I was very much like, from the time we showed up, it was always like, what do we have to do to get out here as quickly as possible?
Do you think that's related to your experience with your dad?
Yeah, so not just my dad, I've got multiple uncles and aunts and cousins who have, gotten sick and died. And I've been at the bedside of, two loved ones as they passed away, So yeah, I think these things really, don't give me a very rosy outlook on what hospitals are.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, for sure. So you kind of like felt like, I don't want to, I'll deal with it when that comes. I'm not going to think about like how this experience should go, sort of thing.
Well, I think at the time it was probably much more sort of avoidance kind of thing. Like, I'm just not going to think about it. But yeah, like, again, sort of reflecting on it, especially 10 years later, 12 years later, and just kind of realizing that about myself, that, yeah, I think from the moment that we stepped foot into a hospital, like, my mind was just trying to figure out, like, how do we get out here as quickly as possible,
Yeah, I can see that for sure. All right, so let's talk about the big day. So I will share a little bit, and I've shared before in the podcast about how the experience went for me. And so it started out with me having contractions. And I remember being at home in the bathroom, having contractions, and then saying, hey, I think we need to go to the hospital. So what was that day like for you?
I was trying to detail my car, if I remember correctly. It was exactly a week after my birthday.
Yep.
Like, I was still trying to celebrate by detailing my car. So yeah, the first time that you said it was kind of, it was kind of an interruption. And yes,
and keep in mind that I was anxious. So I would
right.
like little things, I would just be like, what's going on? Like, so.
Yeah. And that's what I was about to say. Like, you if we're honest, like, sometimes that first one is just kind of you being anxious. That first complaint is just you being anxious. So there was sort of like the process of trying to like figure out, is this real or not? Well, sorry, they're all real. But is this something that we really need to, be attentive to? And if I remember correctly, like, it didn't take much to convince me to get in the car, right?
No, it didn't. It didn't. And I should say, I had been having contractions before that, but they were irregular. They weren't like really painful, but it was clearly like very different that day. So what about the car ride to the hospital?
Yeah, I think I will admit that, and I've told you this before, like, I was still skeptical until we got on the interstate and looked over and saw you like gripping the handle of the door, which is when I realized that you actually were like you were experiencing something for real. And that's when I definitely started taking it more seriously. Yeah.
And I'm not like I don't think loud. I'm going to be more like quiet about.
Yes.
Yeah. What if I'm in pain about something. So, yeah. So we pull up to the hospital, and I knew that you thought it was serious because you let somebody valet the car?
Yeah.
Which you never, ever, ever do. You let somebody valet the car. So I was like, okay, he's like.
It was your car. So that did make the decision a little bit easier, but yeah.
So we get up to labor and delivery, and then
y'all put on the show of like trying to convince everybody that everything was okay, if I remember correctly. Like,
you mean me trying to convince, or like?
No, everybody, like you and the nurses and the doctors, all just trying to be like, yeah, everything's fine,
And see, I don't remember it like that. Like I feel like, I don't know what they were saying, but you definitely seemed to perceive like, so I was having contractions, and then it was like, I got this, like they just kept coming.
Right. And then they did the fluid reduction, right? Or am I remembering? Yeah.
No, you're right. So then they decided, because I had this condition called duodenal atresia, where she couldn't swallow amniotic fluid, I had a ton of extra amniotic fluid. So they thought that if they maybe reduced the amount of fluid, so drained off some of the fluid, then it would help like the contraction slow down. So they drained off like maybe a liter of fluid, somewhere around there.
And then you started having more contractions.
Yeah, it just kept going.
And then that's when like everybody was kind of like trying to smile through it and be like, yeah, well, maybe we'll try some magnesium or whatever it was, and I just remember at some point like calling my mom.
Because you were like the go-to, the in-between to talk to the family.
Yeah, and then y'all like almost trying to clown me because I was telling her that everything was going to be okay, you know. And I was looking back at y'all like y'all have been lying to me this whole time, trying to act like everything's okay. So how are you, like how are you?
And by y'all, you mean like, why are you including me? You like, well, you were a doctor and you included in the rest of the healthcare professionals.
Yes.
All of y'all were like, it's going to be fine.
Right. Which, when obviously, like, it was obvious to me that things were a little bit more serious than people were letting on,
Yeah.
But again, this could also be just me and my natural suspicion of like I just walk into hospitals and have this expectation that something bad's going to happen. So.
Gotcha. Well, you were very calm. Like I never felt like you felt particularly worried about things, even if you were. So I remember I never felt like I was in a ton of pain, to be honest. Like it wasn't like I don't feel like I looked like I was. I mean, I knew I was hurting and I was having the contractions, and I ended up getting an epidural just because they thought maybe that might slow the contractions down too, which it didn't. But I don't remember like looking or feeling in a lot of pain. What do you remember about how I was like?
Yeah, but I mean, you were your sort of typical you. So like, yeah, you were quiet throughout most of it. Like maybe you let on that you were having a bad contraction once, and I just remember that because like it stood out because you were so quiet the rest of the time.
Gotcha. And then I do remember when my water broke, and then feeling like, okay, like this is legit kind of happening.
Yeah, and I think I was just like, yeah, like y'all have been paying attention to what's going on, right? Like, can we stop pretending now? But
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the C-section.
Let's not talk about this.
No, we got to talk about the C-section. So I ended up getting to a point where her heart rate kept dropping, and they were like, well, I think at that point I was 8 centimeters, and they're like, well, we can try and see if you can push. If not, then we need to push because she's smaller. Maybe she can come out with me being 8 centimeters. So we went to the back for the operating room. That didn't work. And then decision was made to go to C-section. So I've talked about how the C-section was a difficult experience for me because I could feel things that I should not have felt. So what was that like for you?
I mean, obviously it was not fun, and I don't know, like I am kind of hesitant to talk about that part.
Oh, why is that?
A couple of reasons, and again, like I've been thinking about this just because that was sort of, you shared the questions with me beforehand, and that was the one that I saw at the top of the list is like, first child's birth. And, and just sort of immediately it was like, I don't know, like I'm not really like happy to discuss that. And a couple of reasons. I mean, we're kind of at this moment in history where there's been a lot of, acknowledgement of racial pain and suffering, of suffering and pain among Black people in particular.
Right.
Or of just this sort of acknowledgement of the inequities, in the society around us, and an awakening among a lot of this country who, maybe didn't recognize just how bad things are. But at the same time, like so much of that awakening is like centered on, having to have these examples of Black pain and trauma for them to process and understand things. And like I think, that moment, like I really see that as like a moment of like Black pain and trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
And you don't want to share that experience of
yeah, so I guess
our
that
very personal trauma.
right. And that's the part that I left off, right? So there's all this like awakening around racial injustice, and it's all like, you know, facilitated by certain people sort of like, absorbing these stories of Black pain and trauma. And I just don't, that doesn't sit right with me, right? Like that shouldn't be the way for so many people to learn. We shouldn't have to have, that be the central way for us to learn. So just to kind of like, I guess, stay true to that part of myself in terms of, not necessarily putting forth, these examples of Black pain and trauma into the world. Like that kind of gives me pause about wanting to talk about this delivery.
Yeah, I think that's 100% fair. So why don't
But
we? Huh?
well, I was gonna say also too, like it was like a really personal moment, right? Like I do, like the part that I think stands out the most clearly to me is like me like standing over you, like trying to get you to focus just on me for a moment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like the height of things. And yeah, I guess I just kind of want to stay true to that. Like, I was, I just wanted that to be about us at that moment, and I kind of still do, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% fair. I actually really like that. So yeah, so that I really like that and I appreciate that. I think we can summarize it up that it was fair to say that it was I've talked about it before,
Sure.
that it was traumatic for me experiencing a C-section with inadequate anesthesia. And then let's move on to the moments though afterwards. So we saw her being born, which will forever be ingrained, or saw her when she got held up and she
Little
looked like a monster.
purple monster. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I was like, she is like coming for everybody. So that I remember.
Yeah. And then they kind of whisk her off to the other room,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and then the sort of decision of like, well, do I stay here or do I go over there? And yeah, but
See, I don't remember that because they had given me drugs by like more drugs by then. So I don't remember a whole lot after that.
yeah, that made the decision a lot easier when you, because you were only like conscious for a few more moments.
Wait, did you actually go? Because I don't remember.
Yeah, because no, you don't remember because you were knocked out. You probably don't remember anything to the Chick-fil-A like an hour later.
Okay, I did not know this. Listen, y'all, can y'all believe this? We've been married for 15 years. Our child is about to be 13, and I did not know that he left.
I mean, I didn't leave the room,
No, 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 no. I didn't mean leave the room.
yeah,
Like, I didn't know that you actually went to go see her in the other room. I did not remember that.
yeah, but I mean, and just to be clear, like it wasn't like the rooms were attached. Like I could still see
Uh
you the
huh.
whole time.
Yep.
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I very, very vividly remember. I mean, that's where I trained to be a doctor. I remember the setup exactly. Okay. That's funny. All right. So then we get to the recovery room, and yes, I wanted Chick-fil-A so bad. And shout out to my bestie Keisha Reddick, who y'all have heard on the podcast before, for bringing me that Chick-fil-A. That was like the best chicken fingers and fries I've ever had in my life. And then I do remember you going to the NICU and taking pictures and coming back and me being like,
I'm gonna let you describe that part.
I was like, oh, is she okay? Like, look at her ears. Like, look at her head. Like, what? I just thought she was like not, I didn't get the warm, fuzzy, like, oh, here's my cute baby feeling when I saw the pictures. What did you feel when you saw her? Because she was tiny, y'all. She weighed 3 pounds, 7 ounces. She was long and
And she had a skull that kind of like the fragments of the skull kind of rode up on top of each other for a while. So
yes.
she had like a ridge on top of her head, which was kind of strange. But
And God, y'all forgive me. I love my child. She's beautiful. She's gorgeous. But it kind of reminded me, I want to say, of like a Vulcan
oh
from
my
Star Trek. So sort of kind. I don't forgive me. But what, you didn't think that? Tell me you thought that. It's just me.
no, it's just you. Yeah, no,
Okay.
I
Okay.
thought she was cute. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So was I just extra over the top? Did you really look at her and was like, you didn't think, oh my gosh, she's so little. She's so, why she look funny? Nothing. That was just me.
No, no, it was just you. Sorry.
Shout out to me being a superstar A mother.
No, I mean, I don't know. Like she was our child, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that was just a continuation of my well-known anxiety problem, which I've gotten better at, but it was just the anxiety. What do you mean? Okay. Oh, are you saying no? It's not. Nobody think anxiety doesn't cause you to think your child looks like a Vulcan. Is that what?
Oh no, I was more talking about the anxiety getting better part. But anyway,
My anxiety is better. It's better than it was then, for sure.
when it comes to our children, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, I guess because they're older and they can tell you when something's wrong. But
That's true. Because for a long time, I was, especially we're not even going to get into that, how when I took her to the doctor and I thought she threw up and all that kind of stuff. Um, all right. So, let's focus. Let's focus. Let's get back on track.
no, I'm just thinking of the time that she actually like projectile vomited, and I kept it quiet because I didn't feel like going to the doctor.
Because you knew that I would like lose it if I
Yeah.
saw. Yeah. Oh, all right. So let's talk about having a child in the NICU. For me, that was so hard. Even though we went to see her every day, twice a day, except for one day, we didn't go see her twice a day, and I still feel guilty about that. I remember crying every day just about for a while and then like kind of cutting back on that. But that was definitely stressful.
Yeah, I mean, of course that was stressful. I just remember at some point, especially once things kind of cleared up and we were, there was less of a question. Actually, I take that back. Like, I never really had any, I was never really afraid, that something bad was going to happen, which is kind of weird because, like, I remember the extubation, you know,
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I was in denial, who knows? But I do remember, like, as things kind of went on, a few weeks into it, I guess, just actually feeling kind of grateful almost. Yeah, I think it was the kid that was celebrating their first birthday in the NICU.
I still remember that too. Yeah, for sure. That was definitely like a, I don't know, humbling, grounding kind of experience to see this child who had been in the NICU for an entire year. And we were just there for a month. Like it just, I think as we got, closer to her going home, felt grateful that she was doing well. She was growing, all those things.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you hate to benefit in a way off of somebody else's suffering, but that moment was just kind of, this experience was obviously hard to get through and not fun at all, but everything had worked out, so it's just like we had sort of gotten this insight into like how fragile this whole
Yeah,
thing could possibly be, and I guess how lucky we were.
for
So
sure. Yeah. Because after the surgery, which was funny, some of the moments that we joke about were how the surgeon comes out. He used to always say the
the
child
child, yeah,
because I'm guessing he couldn't remember if it was a boy or girl, so he would just call him all the child.
he's
And
also
he
German, so he's proficient that way.
yes, exactly. And
And should we just mention that I'm half German before somebody sends emails?
that is true. Yes, yes, y'all. His mother is German, so um, so that was a funny experience. And also, we had, I think, I'm gonna be honest. I remember none of the doctors who I saw at all while she was in the NICU, except that time she got extubated too early. That was right after her surgery. I do remember that doctor because he helped calm me down. But the nurses were great.
Yes.
They were just like, I remember them being like, "Oh no, you're gonna come watch this child. Um, you're gonna come change his diaper." I was in a state, and we were both had a flexible work schedule where we could spend quite a bit of time there. So I feel like we got to know them very well.
Yeah, and to go back to the question earlier, feeling if I felt treated differently as a father, like they absolutely did not. They were just as engaging and, willing to bring me into things as they were so there I definitely felt treated equally.
Yeah. Yeah. And and then actually I do remember one other doctor, the one at the very end, because she got transferred to the second hospital because they needed space at the big hospital at Duke.
Oh yeah, I
And
forgot about that.
and I do remember the doctor being like, "Y'all might want to go to the movies or something because she's coming home next week." And we were like, "What?" I mean, it was like Friday, and she was like, "Monday, it's gonna happen," or something like that.
Yeah, and I remember the moment of like, you sure this is a good idea to send this child home with us? Because we don't really know what we're doing. So
It's like, she's a doctor. Y'all think she knows what she's doing, but this is different for her, which was
yeah,
totally true.
yeah, no, you know how to get the babies out, but after that, you're
Clueless.
yeah,
Yeah. But we managed.
yeah,
Yeah.
we figured it out.
We
I
did.
think.
We did. I would say the hardest part, and then as we kind of wrap up, was that in the beginning, like that just sort of adjustment when she came home, we had to feed her all the dang time.
Yeah, yeah, that was a lot. Like I remember I've got a picture of like all the little jars of breast milk, in the refrigerator.
Like every 3 hours we had to feed her, I want to say.
And those stupid the bottles with the valves in them
Yep.
that had to be cleaned out and all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, and now look at her. She's 12.
Yeah, taller than
And
you.
much taller than me, 5 inches at least at this point, and counting. So I think we did good.
Yeah, and that's I think another part too that I've just kind of like let go of is like all the work, not just like work, but the rote kind of like like washing bottles and this sort of routine where you're in the middle of it. It's just so like tiresome and boring. But yeah, that part I just kind of forgot about. Let go.
Yeah. So the second time around felt easy. So for our second pregnancy, to me, and the delivery, the C-section, that in general felt like easy peasy for me. How did it feel for you?
Yeah, same. Like I don't. It's horrible to say, but I don't really remember much about it. Like, like I kind of remember going back to the room with you, and a couple minutes later, like here's our second child.
Yeah, I think I was like, you don't have to come to the appointments. It's fine. I'm just popping over for an appointment. Like it was just way more laid back the second time.
I believe I went to all the appointments, so right?
Oh, did you? Is it bad that I can't remember? I feel like I was I don't know. I feel like maybe you did, maybe you did. I don't feel like it felt like a big deal. I know I wanted you there for the first time for all of them, but the second time I felt a little bit more like laid back about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were definitely more relaxed.
Yeah. And the C-section was a much better experience.
Yeah. But again, same sort of thing where I was just from the moment we hit the door of the hospital, it's just like, what we got to do to get out of here?
Okay.
I remember.
Let's talk about that for a second, okay? Because most of the time people go home on the third day after a C-section. Now, I was motivated to go home early, y'all, because I'm not a hospital person anyway. Even though I work in hospitals, I don't like being a patient at all, period. So day 2, I had to keep my catheter in for a little bit because I had like some scar tissue or something or whatever. And my physician was being extra cautious, like just keep it in, give your bladder some rest. So on day 2, my catheter comes out and Falcon is like, all right, let's go. We going home. I was like, I think a couple other things have to happen before I can go. You were just like,
Well,
no.
I mean,
You were like, let me go get the car.
Oh, I mean, because I don't want people to think that I was like out.
No, you were kind of.
So I do like. Let's be clear. Like you wanted to leave too.
I totally wanted to leave. Completely wanted to leave.
And if I remember correctly, it was more that like the nurse left out the part about, she was like, well, we'll just pull this catheter out and then y'all can go. But she left out the part about you having to like use the bathroom 2 times or something like that.
Yeah. To actually prove that I could use the bathroom before I left.
Yeah, so I was a little bit irritated, to find out that we still had a few hours to go. I'm sorry.
But you did, but like you said, I'm being a little bit dramatic, guys. I wanted to go too. So it's not like I was ready to go. I hate being in hospitals. And he did, to his credit. I had staples and I was not going back in order to get my staples taken out. So I took a staple removal kit home from the hospital and all the stuff for it. And he took my staples out at home.
I feel like we were in trouble for telling that part. Like, weren't you supposed to go back to the doctor for that?
Well, it's out there now. And you did a very good job of taking my staples out. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. So last thing, what would be like, if you could give one piece of advice to expectant dads, what would that advice be?
Oof. Relax. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. So I guess I'm not a huge fan of this whole like mom dad thing, right? And this whole like division, So what's the advice to dads? Like, you get in there and be a parent. Like, figure out what needs to be done and do it. Don't get tied up on the roles of what what you feel other people think you should be doing. Whatever expectations you think other people have of what parts you should be involved in and not be involved in. Like, this is, so just get in there. And I don't like this answer. I don't like this part of the answer because, like, I don't want to say like get in there and help, because I don't want to sound like preachy about it, but resist this urge to feel that dads do certain things and moms do certain things.
I mean, I think what you said is already great. Like, don't feel tied to kind of like society expectations or anybody's expectations of what a dad should be.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that advice goes for all parents, not just dads, but moms too. It's, don't feel beholden to these sort of larger expectations about what your role should be in either the pregnancy or the birthing process or raising the child afterwards.
And that is something that you 100% live by, because full confession, everybody, between the two of us, my husband is like the better, more organized parent in terms of getting things done for our children. He takes them to school. He does my girl's hair. He does the best Afro puffs I've ever seen. He takes care of school forms, appointments, things like that. So he, like, the whole get in there and just do what needs to be done is certainly words that he lives by. And I, of course, am forever grateful for that.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it.
Look, are you? Maybe like 90% of the time, but sometimes you be like, can you get in here and do like a little bit of something, please?
We'll save that for the next podcast.
Okay. All right. Well, husband, thank you for coming onto my podcast and for being such a wonderful support person for me for nearly 15 years.
You're welcome. I'm going to resist the urge. Have a snappy comeback. You're welcome.
The comeback of, well, yeah, I came on because you harassed me until I said yes.
No, I'm happy to be a part of this. Thank you for letting me do it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I know that I am biased a bit, but wasn't that a great episode? I feel like I did talk a lot. Maybe I was trying to do that to help him feel more comfortable, but I do hope you enjoyed hearing our conversation. Now, after every episode when I have a guest on, I do something called Nicole's Notes, where I talk about my top 2 or 3 takeaways from the episode. And these are my Nicole's Notes from my episode with my husband. Number 1, I love how he said that he doesn't hold on to the more anxious parts, that he holds on to the parts that were more joyful. I think we can all take a lesson from that. It can be easy sometimes to hang on to or kind of get stuck on some of the negative pieces of an experience because those emotions can be pretty strong. But you should also be intentional about hanging on to or focusing on the positive parts, the joyful parts. So even if things don't go exactly as you expect, be intentional about focusing on the positive parts. That will serve you well in the long run. The second thing I want to say is that after we finished recording, right after he was done, he said, wait a minute, I have one more piece of advice. Moms don't know what they're doing either. And he didn't mean that in the sense that, moms literally don't know what they're doing. What he meant was that first-time moms are figuring it out as well. Moms and dads are both figuring out how to be parents. Just because you're a mom doesn't mean everything is going to suddenly pop into your head or that everything is going to be natural, that everything is just going to happen just because you gave birth to this child, that you're going to automatically know everything. That is not how it works. He is very correct that you're both kind of figuring things out together, and you do figure it out, but don't expect that you're just going to know everything right off the bat. It doesn't happen that way. That's okay. That's normal, but you will figure it out. And then the third thing I want to say, and this is me getting a little sappy, but this was definitely a confirmation for me about why I married him in the first place and why I love him so. He truly helps me to be the best version of myself, and I'm grateful to have him as my husband and best friend. All right, so that is it for this episode of the podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcast or wherever you listen, Spotify, Google Play. And I would love it if you leave a review in Apple Podcast. It helps other women to find the show. It really helps the show to grow, which the show has been growing leaps and bounds in the last few weeks. I so appreciate that. And I also do shout outs from those reviews. So do leave that review in Apple Podcast if you don't mind and if you feel so inclined and like the show. Also, you and your partner should head on over to my website, check out my free online class on how to make a birth plan that works. In this 1-hour on-demand class, you will learn questions to ask your provider, how to get your medical team to pay attention to your birth wishes, some things you need to know that are very influential in your birth experience, and much, much more. You can sign up for the class at ncrcoaching.com/register. Again, totally free, on demand, about an hour of your time, and well worth it. Now, next week on the podcast, I will have an interview episode. I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to choose yet, so you'll have to come back next week and find out. So do come on back next week. And until then, I wish you a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. Head to my website, ncrcoaching.com, to get even more great info, including free downloadable resources on how to manage pain in labor and warning signs to look out for after birth. You'll also find information on my free online class on how to make a birth plan, as well as everything you need to know about the birth preparation course. Again, that's ncrcoaching.com, and I will see you next week.